Hello, everyone. I want to thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I am happy to see some familiar faces and also some brand new ones. So I'd love to start by just emphasizing how grateful I am for all of the faculty, family, and friends who were able to make it to this panel. This is a particularly significant discussion for not only first-generation college students, but also the Jefferson community as a whole. And so it means a lot to me to have so many faculty members and students willing to listen and engage with this topic. So I'll start by just briefly introducing myself. My name is Kaitlyn Viola. I am a first-generation college student, fourth year Law and Society major, and also the current president of the Law and Society Honor Society, which we actually have the founder on this call as well. I organized this event in collaboration with the Arlen Specter Center Roundtables and Professor Evan Lane. And the focus of this panel is to establish past and current challenges for first generation students at Thomas Jefferson University. This event will be recorded. Although the term first gen can also be used to describe someone who was born outside of the US to parents who are not US citizens, I will be using it strictly in the academic context to describe a student who is the first in their family to attend a four-year university, meaning their parents did not complete a four-year college or university degree. In identifying these challenges by hearing the experiences and reflections of first-gen TJU alumni and current students, as well as faculty, the greater purpose of this panel is to identify a need for additional programs to better address the issues faced by Jefferson's first-gen student population. Not only is this improvement guaranteed to better student outcomes overall, but it will improve retention rates and attract a greater number of first-gen students who might feel unease about embarking on the path to higher education as the first in their family to do so. So before I introduce our first panelist, I wanted to briefly tell the story of first-generation graduate of Cornell University and American novelist Janine Capot-Crusette. In a PBS NewsHour video, Capot-Crusette shares her thoughts as to why first-gen students could benefit from university-facilitated first-gen specific support systems. Like many first-gens, she recalls having felt like she had no roadmap as a first-gen, having navigated her first weeks of undergrad by carefully watching who she thought of as real students or those whose parents had gone to college. It was by watching her peers that she learned that the writing center was covered by tuition, or that you were supposed to wear flip-flops in the communal showers. There were many things, though, that she recalls having learned the hard way, such as when she dropped a class because the textbooks were so expensive, not knowing that some professors put books on course reserve, or hearing her professor say time and time again, "See me in office hours," having no clue what it had meant, but feeling too embarrassed to ask such an obvious question. She also recalls having a mentor her first year, but quickly realizing that he did not understand how confused she was, in part because he came from a long line of college-attending family members. Members or mentors for first-generation college students, Capot-Crusette says, must be either first-gen graduates themselves or trained by people who are intimately familiar with the unique challenges faced by first-gen students. They need to knock on our literal doors, she says, and be compensated for doing so. Now, as a professor, she finds herself in front of a group of readers or new students and asks them who identifies as first-gen students. Typically, students raise their hands and she congratulates them, but after almost every lecture in which she does this, there's always someone or multiple students who come up to her afterwards to admit that they did not raise their hand because they didn't recognize being a first-gen college student as something to be proud of. When I was in their place, I wouldn't have raised my hand either, she admits. It is no secret that adults with at least one college-educated parent are far more likely to complete a college degree compared with those with less educated parents. As most of us know, applying to higher education is a complicated multi-step process, and navigating admissions and financial aid is a challenge in and of itself. And when you don't have parents who have knowledge in navigating these experiences to guide you, it becomes very easy to feel lost and confused as if the odds are stacked against you. Many first gens recognize being admitted to higher education programs as one of their proudest successes yet, as they very well should. But the challenge of being a first gen does not stop once you've enrolled. According to EAB, a consulting firm specializing in education institutions, nearly a third of undergrads are first-gen students, and they're more than twice as likely to leave school within 3 years than students who are not first-gen. Only 48% of first-gen students are on track to graduate 3 years after enrollment, compared to about 66% of non-first-gens. So why are first-generation college students leaving their institutions prior to graduation? While financial issues are a common barrier, challenges span much further than that. Many first gens, including myself, experience feelings of hyper-independence and shame or embarrassment, all of which tend to prevent them from asking questions or seeking the proper guidance in a way that labels them as a first gen. Without proper identification, many first gens fall through the cracks. In a survey I've conducted on multiple Jefferson faculty members, 75% of respondents expressed feeling that identifying first gens in their classes or offices was either somewhat, slightly, or very difficult, with 25% reporting that it was not difficult at all. 100% of respondents, however, expressed a willingness to help first gen students. One respondent having stated, "I would be happy to guide a first gen student in my class if they reach out. Otherwise, the professor does not have the knowledge." But again, we run into the common feelings of shame or hyper-independence experienced by first-gen students. And often first-gens don't even recognize that they are first-gen, which is something I witnessed firsthand while conducting student surveys on first-gen students on Jefferson's campus. Many don't even know what it means. Janine Capo-Crusette put it perfectly. They need to knock on our literal doors, and ideally they should be intimately familiar with the unique obstacles with which first-gens are faced. The primary step to addressing the needs of first-gen students is properly identifying those students, which panelist and Law and Society graduate Aliyah McLaurin will speak more upon later. So now, to introduce you to our first-gen panelists, all of whom are very near and dear to me. Our first panelist to speak will be Leslie Dorantes. Leslie is a fourth-year Law and Society major, president of the Latin American Student Organization at Jefferson, and a student mentor and tutor for the Law and Society Honor Society. And today she'll be reflecting on the struggles of first-gen Latinx students at Jefferson in the context of imposter syndrome and mental health. So whenever you're ready, Leslie.
Hi, everyone. First, I'd like to thank you guys for coming and listening to some of the stories for first-gen students. Also, I'd like to thank Professor Lane for giving us this space, and thank you to Kaitlyn for hosting this event and providing a space for women of color. So mental health for first-gen students is something that usually gets ignored because there's a lack of support targeting those students. So in general, first-gen students struggle with academic and social stigmas that may limit their success. For example, we have to teach ourselves new ways to study, how to accurately fill out FAFSA, and being fully independent with no family guidance. For Latina students, these struggles are much worse. Imagine having to fill out FAFSA documents and apply for financial aid and scholarships and understand what exactly you're putting yourself into, while also having to translate it into a language you don't fully comprehend yourself. Latina students have more pressure and stress because of family obligations. Many times we help support our family financially, and leaving to college can affect situations back at home. There's also guilt associated with leaving, because now that we're gone, who's going to translate doctor appointments for our moms, our dads, aunts, and uncles? Who's going to help them fill out their citizenship forms or to renew their visas so they don't get deported? Who's going to protect them from the ignorant people in the street who refuse to understand their tongue? Our families depend on us just like we depend on them. In general, it's difficult to adjust to new changes since there's no one here to support you. We also have cultural differences that affect our situations. For Latinos, it's hard to leave your house because your parents, who did not go to college and did not grow up with the cultural assimilation of the United States, don't understand the needs of a college student. There's a duality that Latinos are struggling with, their school life versus their home life, and many times these two are conflicted. Latino students struggle with mental health many times arise from imposter syndrome and guilt. It's obvious to us that TJU and other universities in general just weren't built for us. And therefore there's this constant inner struggle with feeling like you don't belong or aren't good enough to be here. Latino students may have higher grades, but they believe they don't deserve them, or it was a mistake, or they're simply here to meet a quota. Imposter syndrome will likely be followed with guilt. Many times students must pull themselves together. For us, we have that extra pressure of not just being first generation students, but first-generation Americans. Our parents struggled getting to this country, so the least we could do is get a good education and financial stability. There's a higher expectation set for us, and failure simply isn't an option. There's a pressure for Latinos and many other racial and ethnic groups at the campus here in TJU. So they have to make their parents' sacrifice worth it. For us, we carry the weight of our parents, our grandparents, our ancestors, who all had dreams but were barely surviving and couldn't imagine it happening. We also carry the rest of the Latino community on top of us. By getting a good education, becoming doctors and lawyers, we're representing the dreams of all Latinos, their futures, their expectations, and their realities. Being a Latino student is not just about you and your individual goals. It's about everyone else who looks like you. So while yes, we're very smart, we work hard and we get straight A's, we're also very tired. We can't seem to get the answers to our questions, and these expectations are crushing many of us. Along with this, Latina students lack any guidance. We have very few Latino professors, and many of them are adjuncts. A lot of the time, we have no one we can really talk to and comprehend our issues with. For example, when the issue of race is brought up in class, it's usually through a Black and white view. Latino students are left out of the conversation, even though racism affects us as well, and we struggle with our identity crisis. If I'm not Black and I'm not white, what exactly am I? Latino students are constantly asking themselves these questions. We don't learn about our history in the classroom, and we have to resort to finding other ways to gain that knowledge. Even as a class such as Latinx American Studies, while we very much appreciate it and it's been very helpful, it can't tackle all the differences of being a Mexican from a border town or a Puerto Rican in Philly, or the many various other types of Latinos there are. By hiring more diverse staff, students of color will be more confident talking about their issues, but also talking about their culture and lifestyles, creating that community on campus. Especially as a Latina woman who falls under two minority categories, not just being a woman, but a woman of color, most of the professors and students are white, and it's likely that I'll be the only Latino in any given classroom. It's difficult for many of us to participate because we'll be judged and criticized for our experience, since they're not like those of the white faculty and student. Many of us would rather stay quiet, knowing we won't be understood. And the same thing happens in counseling services. Not having culturally competent mental health providers prevents Latinos from engaging or reaching out to these people. Similarly, if Latino students are facing discrimination or prejudice inside the institution, they feel obligated to do something to change those conditions for future generations. They join and start organizations, create proposals, attend meetings, all with little help of anyone, since nobody's ever done it before. So now, instead of the regular workload that a white student has, they're pressured to do more, along with the courseworks and internships, jobs, and grad school applications, which again, they already don't receive sufficient help with. In general, Latino students struggle with mental health just like any other students, but we lack the resources to adequately overcome these barriers. Many times, these struggles stay internal, they're invisible, and no one else really knows how to deal with it. We've had Latina students who come to campus and then have to leave because of the mental health struggles they're having on campus without finishing their degree. First-gen specific counselors are a necessity at Jefferson to have the proper support for all students, along with more diverse staff and counselors that can provide suitable services. Again, I just want to thank everyone for coming and listening to, and I hope you learn a little bit about the experiences of Latinos and what it would mean for us to have first-gen counselors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. So our next panelist is TJU alum and first-gen Law and Society graduate, Aliyah McLaurin. Aliyah is the former treasurer and founding board member of the Law and Society Honor Society, and she'll be speaking about her experience as a first-gen at Jefferson, with attention to the lack of support for first-gens as an administrative issue, as well as her experience as a first-gen transitioning into law school.
Thank you, Kaitlyn, and thank you everyone for being here today and listening to all of us in our stories. It's very important, and I think, again, I'm so grateful for Kaitlyn for inviting me so I can share my experience. So Harvard Business Review defines imposter syndrome as a collective of feelings of inadequacy that persists despite evident success. Imposters suffer from chronic self-doubt and a sense of intellectual fraudulence that overrides any feeling of success or external proof of their incompetence, or of their competence, I'm sorry. Imposter syndrome is a very daunting and lonely feeling that quite honestly never goes away. I had imposter syndrome all throughout my time at Jefferson, and it increased tenfold when I entered law school. If I had the tools necessary throughout my time at Jefferson, I think it would have made my experience easier and made the transition into law school smoother, since I would have had the knowledge and the tools necessary to combat those feelings. There are some steps I think Jefferson could implement that could ease some of these feelings first-generation students go through. I would like to reiterate, these feelings do not go away, and I struggle with them daily, but I think these steps could at least spark a conversation. First, on the application process, Jefferson could have a box for applicants to check if they are first-generation students. To assist, Jefferson needs to be aware of how many students are possibly suffering and going through the same issue. Secondly, I think there needs to be a club or organization on campus specifically for first-generation students. There are so many benefits knowing you're not the only one, which may allow people to open up and share many problems, frustrations, and provide networking within the group, since the majority of the time we do not have a family member to vent to, or a friend, or know anyone who is in the field we want to pursue. Jefferson can also implement a committee of deans and other professors who are also first generations to discuss ways to better assist first generation students in and outside of the classroom. I've had several amazing professors and faculty at Jefferson that I know firsthand who are willing to listen and provide assistance, but I had to reach out personally. And it was not until my senior year where I felt comfortable disclosing that information with others. I knew there were specific professors that understood the situation that I'm in, or who were in the same position at one point. It would ease many of the apprehensions that I've had, and I could have reached out earlier. But as Kaitlyn mentioned, a lot of the times people don't want to reach out because they're scared and they don't have that sense of community. Lastly, the student-run organization and the First Gen committee could meet once a month to discuss any problems or situations the students are facing and come up with any solutions to ease their fears, provide networking opportunities and events, provide mental health advocacy, as Leslie just stated, and I know many first-generation students struggle with, as well as discuss funding so first generations can explore internship opportunities without the fear of not having enough money to pay for tuition, to pay for food, to pay for housing. There are so many times where I had to give up internship opportunities because I had to work to fund my next semester, or I had to eat food, and it really impacted my law school application, as well as many of the applications I'm applying for now for summer internships as a law student. Before going to Jefferson, guidance counselors and teachers always say college is the best 4 years of your life. And I can honestly say college changed my life in the best way possible. I received my education. I've met amazing people that I hold near and dear to my heart. But there were also countless times where I suffered in silence because my close friends did not understand what I was going through as a first generation student. There were countless times I almost dropped out because of money, a $2,000 tuition bill, which for most people, that's not a lot. But for me, it was world crushing that I could not pay $2,000 to continue my education at Jefferson. There are faculty like Professor Lane who empathized for me and tried to find ways to keep me in the program. And there were other people at Jefferson that did not understand. It almost seemed as though they didn't care whether I stayed or I left. There is a disconnect between the student experience as a first generation and administration. Don't get me wrong, as I mentioned, there are professors who are welcoming and would assist in any way possible, but the administration needs a push in the right direction. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Aliyah. So last but certainly not least, our final panelist is Bendre Oniyama. She is also a TJU alum and a first-gen Law and Society graduate, and also the founder and former president of the Law and Society Honor Society. She'll be reflecting on her experience of coming from an immigrant family and post-college pressure by family members as a result of being a first-gen.
Hi, so to echo everything the panelists before me have said, it is wonderful to see so many people gathered for what I personally consider to be such an important issue. And I'm so happy that Kaitlyn and Professor Lane are taking the steps to put this out there. So I hope that what we have to say today is truly listened to and taken in by the administration. First-gen college student support is just as important when leaving undergraduate school as it is when entering. The same issue of the student encountering uncharted territory with little options for guidance applies. Personally, it felt exhausting when it seemed like I never got a break, a moment where I knew exactly what to do next and how to navigate. I left my first university having made the decision to do so well before Thanksgiving break. And again, that's literally halfway through the semester. Because I realized that I was literally running out of money to continue attending. And I was so embarrassed to talk to anyone, including both my circle of completely non-first generation college student friends, and certainly also not first generation faculty at the school. I sat out of school for a full semester, 2 if you count the summer semester after that, and eventually got the chance to attend a second university, Jefferson, through the help of a mentor who knew my situation and struggles as a first-gen student and directed me toward the school. I naively stepped onto campus thinking I was better prepared the second time around, and instead spent 4 years learning how to survive college as a first-gen student. I had to start all over again as the first in my family entering into a career field right after. Admittedly, my program mentor, Professor Lane, did a great job helping me figure things out. Prior to my discussion with him, I felt my only option was to go to graduate school, preferably right away. This is because I could not get rid of the nagging feeling that I was squandering my opportunities. Who was I to feel unsure and tired when so many before me never had the chance to dream of graduate school? It felt ridiculous for me to question what felt like such a natural next and only step after graduating college. Talking to my mentor made me realize that there are more options than I initially thought. Going to graduate school was ultimately meant to lead to a life of measurable stability. At least that was my sole motivator for attending for a majority of my life. However, Professor Lane made me understand that it is just as important for me to consider my own happiness and mental stability. If I could not conceive of myself as a fulfilled and happy individual without a graduate degree, then I should surely go. But if I am hesitant and desperately hoping for an alternative, then I should not let the guilt of wasting an opportunity push me down a path I could regret. I was reminded that, considering I barely financially made it through undergraduate, graduate school was nothing for me to rush into. Professor Lane's advice: work in a field that interested me and then decide if I truly want to apply to a law school or any other graduate program. At this point, I would have more clarification on whether my choosing to study would be a complement to my future life goals and genuine interests. When are you going to apply to law school? How's studying for graduate school going? Was all I ever seemed to hear. Nothing about an alternative was ever brought up. This made Professor Lane's advice particularly timely, since it seemed everyone around me had also naturally assumed graduate school would be my next step. I said all this to highlight the importance of educators who are able to empathize. My mentor was able to put himself in my place, even as an individual who is not first gen and who did go to graduate school, and understand where my reservations and fear were coming from. If I could be reassured in the spring semester of my senior year that I would not be disappointing my entire immigrant family and relatives who would love to have the educational opportunities I do, imagine how much reassurance could be created if institutions properly invested in staff, resources, and programs targeted at first-gen students from the beginning. I, for one, wholeheartedly argue that it makes all the difference. Now, as an adult in a career field working for a boss who is also first generation, there is a different level of assistance and understanding that he provides. He takes time to explain everything to me, even if he gets just an inkling that I may not have encountered it before. Because the corporate world is very different from anything I had ever experienced, and honestly something that I am still learning, even though my boss does a very great job of breaking things down for me. The level of support and courage my boss's leadership and camaraderie provides is one that I had never met prior to this job. However, rather than being lucky like I want students coming after me to be reassured that they will receive this implicit understanding and direction. I sincerely hope that this is considered thoroughly by administration. A good start would be an FYS adjacent program that first-gen college students must take. At worst, there are some first-gen students and immigrant youth who are super prepared for life during and after college, and the course has no impact on them. At best, numerous first-gen college students who would otherwise fall through the cracks in terms of proper support are identified and given the proper help and direction. With a solid foundation at the start of a college career and a diligent plan of support from the institution throughout the 4 years and beyond, The stressors of a first-gen student navigating college and career walks of life can be greatly mitigated. That is the end of what I have to say. And again, thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much, Bendriel. And I do just want to make a point from these three panelists. I mean, if they hadn't fought so hard to maintain their positions at Jefferson and make it all the way through, even through all of their struggles, for example, you know, the Latin American Student Organization never would have had as spectacular of a leader as Leslie. I mean, Aliyah was basically spearheaded our university facilitated free LSAT courses for students. That never would have happened at Jefferson. And Bendriel founded the Honor Society for Law and Society. So just some examples of things that never would have taken place if these first gens didn't fight so hard to be where they are. And so before I open the floor to any other faculty members or students who would like to share anything regarding this topic, I wanted to share some highlights from the results of a first-gen student experience survey that I conducted at Jefferson this month, including a testimonial from a first-year first-gen student that really stuck out to me. So in the survey, I asked first-gen students at TJU East Falls how they felt their position as the first in their family to attend college made their experience more challenging from 1 to 10, with 1 being not much more challenging and 10 being much more challenging. On a scale from 1 to 10, 54.5% of respondents selected 10, much more challenging, as their survey response, with 27.3% selecting 8. Students also reported having felt like the university did little to assist them and expressed wishing that they had additional assistance in areas such as financial aid and resume building towards BIPOC / first-gen communities, financial literacy and aid, counseling services, and specifically a first-gen coach. One first-gen respondent shared the following. I wish I was exposed to other fields of healthcare or opportunities I missed out on because my parents do not have the connections or knowledge. They have zero education, barely know English, and have hard jobs that don't require an education. Resume building and getting patient care hours is something I struggle with finding resources for, as it is entirely new to me and I have no connections. I find that other students have family members whose jobs in healthcare, typically needing an education, and that helps them along with connections and resources more readily. However, growing up, I never got that help. Instead, I was the one helping my parents with bills or taxes and taking care of my own financial aid and tuition. I still do not know how Jefferson scholarships or financial aid works, and I find it daunting to negotiate prices or find opportunities to get more money. For example, my friend's mother would let her know of Jefferson scholarships or COVID-related money to receive because their mom is more adept at English and financial affairs. This is not the case for my family, and so I miss out on opportunities to save money on education. Having proactive first-gen coaches would be extremely helpful, and I love that idea so much. So with that, I would ask Chancellor McKeather, I know you were so kind as to make time to join this panel. I was curious as to anything you might like to share in terms of what assistance programs or other affirmative resources you'd like to see for first-gen students at Jefferson.
Great, thank you, Kaitlyn. And let me, first of all, apologize to everyone for being a little late. It was another meeting that I had to attend, but this was important to get to. So thank you for organizing it and for inviting me. So let me just say, I think this topic of first-gen students is really, really important. I'm a first-gen student, as many others on the call may be. So I understand what it means to be the first in your family to go to college and not really know many things that other students just seem to just know intuitively. I think I shared maybe with Professor Lane at some point when I was teaching. I remember a student came to class the first day and asked me, when are you going to pass out books? I'm like, no, you're in college now. We don't do that here. And this was obviously a first-gen student who had no idea that in college, you buy your books and you have to have money to buy your books. So I get it. And I only heard part of some of the testimonies here, but like many of you, I struggled, getting through school because, I didn't know where I fit. Other people seem to just know everything. They even knew how to dress. It just seemed to be a whole different world for me. So I know that I'll certainly want my colleagues here on the line to talk about some of the services that we currently offer for all students, in particular for first-gen students. But I can tell you about an initiative that I'm really had already started to spearhead at the time this whole conversation was starting. So as you may know or may not know, we're in the process now of preparing for our next year's budget. And so we've been asked throughout the university to provide proposals for new initiatives. And what I can tell you is that the one that I'd already started working on, and Dean Humphreys and I have been working on, is this new program. Again, this is just proposed, so it's not something I can say that's going to happen 100%, but this tells me that this is really important. And what it's called is the First Turam Emerging Scholars Program. And it's what this program is designed to do is to assist, in particular, incoming as well as current first generation and Pell students make a successful transition to college. And this program also includes having someone called a coach, what we're going to call it, with a particular caseload to really work with these students in particular. And again, to help navigate university resources, because my sense is that a lot of the resources that's needed are there, but they may not be taken advantage of or not not packaged in the right way. And so it's my hope that if we can get this program approved with the proper funding, that we have a person who can help these incoming students, these first-gen students, understand what their needs are. Because sometimes if you're first gen, you don't know what you need. You don't know where to go. You have no idea what those things look like. And so the purpose really of this person will really be to help these students navigate, in particular the first year students. But I do recognize that even after your first year, you still have challenges. You know, the students know their options when it comes to financing. They know how to cultivate a mentor, how to cultivate relationships. So there's so many intangibles that people just don't know. Again, you don't know what you don't know. And so what this program is really designed to do is to help ensure that every student that we admit to the university, and I know Aaron's team has done a wonderful job, as they always do, in admitting, really great students. But you can be well prepared academically, but not prepared for the rigors of college, and from a social and cultural perspective. And so this program really is designed to do just that. But again, I do want to say that I know that there are existing initiatives and opportunities that's being offered throughout, the university. But I think this type of coach type person could help to ensure that these students are being connected to those things that they need in order to be successful. So I'll stop there. But again, I'm really excited about this conversation. And again, I'll just say again, I didn't hear all the testimony. I think I may have heard the last two, but they all sound familiar because trust me, I've experienced from being told to go home because I didn't know what I was doing, or all these things that, as a first-gen student, you come in with some level of insecurity just because you see other people who just seem to be getting so many things just right. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions if I can.
Thank you so much, Chancellor McGether. Yeah, I think that one really big issue that we've kind of mentioned already goes back to the visibility and just the way that it's really difficult at times to even identify these students, which goes back to the whole idea of the importance of community and also just identifying the students in the first place, because a lot of the times I think it circles back to these like stupid questions, quote unquote, where you're kind of hesitant to ask these things because things tend not to make sense to you when they seem to be very easily understandable by the average student. For example, like I identify with a lot of what you spoke about. I had no idea that the FAFSA needed to be done every year. I thought that it was just, the first year just had you set for 4 years. So that's just a perfect example of if a friend of mine hadn't brought up that their parents completed the FAFSA for them, I would have completely missed the deadline. And there's no way that I would have been able to complete undergrad. So just things like that, I think it is scary how quickly and detrimentally first gens can tend to fall through the cracks, because there's just, I think that we could really benefit from a coach of sorts like you spoke about, just to address these unique issues.
Sure. Well, I'll say this, Kaitlyn, and I don't know if Neoka is on the call or not, but I know I know that she can talk about the program. They have a first gen program in her college, which I think is an excellent model. But I think though this conversation deserves a conversation at a higher level. While I think the colleges, should and can take some responsibility, I think that is incumbent upon the administration to make sure that all students' needs are being met.
And to go off of that, I mean, what Aliyah and I had discussed that we feel would be a really easy way to better the issue of identification is just simply having a box to check off within any given application that indicates that you're the first in your family to attend, a 4-year institution. So that alone would just enter students into some sort of database that will just keep them from, again, falling through the cracks like we discussed. But I do invite any other faculty members or students to add anything or reflect upon any other experiences or concerns that they might have.
I want to build on something Dr. McGether said, because there are higher ups who hopefully will listen to this. So I like to talk to them in language that they understand. Retention will have students stay here longer, good students, which means more money. We'll be attracting more and better students who know that this is a university that cares. More students equals more money. Never mind the moral effect and the fact that it's the right thing to do. But when we talk to corporations, we have to talk in language that they understand. And I just want to point out, I think that Kaitlyn made a very good point to this. Look at the domino effects if we lose people. Had we lost Aliyah, we would not have had the programs we've had. Her family would not have a budding lawyer that's going to change her family. She's going to have a family now that's going to be uplifted because of her success. The dominoes go all over the place. The same with Benny and the same with Leslie. All of those things is the right thing to do for all of us, never mind the students, but just talking in corporate language, it makes sense financially.
I believe we have a hand raised, so feel free.
Dr. Grunwald.
Thank you, and it's our pleasure to be here, certainly for me, and thank you, Kaitlyn, and to the entire panel for your courageous discussions and for sharing your personal experiences and for helping us all appreciate your journey. I shared with Kaitlyn when I replied to her invitation that I was doubly interested in attending, not only for all the reasons we've discussed, but because I'm you. I have not read Professor Capocruset's novels, but I did read her essay of some years ago entitled "Taking My Parents to College." And it reminded me of, I'll admit it's a vague memory, I'll show my age here. I'll put it this way, over half a century ago, how does that sound? I was you. My parents took me to the first day of college as a first generation student. So I certainly, it was an entirely different world, of course, in many ways, but not in other ways. And so I certainly recall having to adapt and learn and find my way through. And there were those who helped and those who did not. And everything you're saying rings totally true. So I can say from a personal perspective, I'm happy to join your campaign to raise awareness and develop resources, but I'll put my dean's hat on for a moment. along with my colleagues, Dr. McHeather and other colleagues here. Let's roll up our sleeves, and I'm happy to be part of the team effort in finding ways to do everything you've been talking about. So thank you again, and I look forward to working together to see how we can all help address these very important issues.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grunwald.
Dr. Grunwald, see, I thought that you were born Dr. Grunwald. I didn't realize that you had that kind of a journey. But I do think it's important for students to hear and understand that we weren't born doctors and professors and administrators. You know, we too have a journey story to tell. And so that's why I think sometimes for us to be a little vulnerable and tell our stories is important, because, you know, you never know who you might be inspiring by telling your journey story.
That's a really, really great point. If Dean Klinkhammer would like to share anything.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Kaitlyn, and everybody else who spoke for some very insightful information. I took detailed notes of your research, and I really appreciate presenting the research as well as all the experiences that you shared here with us. So I'm not a first generation student, but I am an international who came to the United States and was thrown as an adult into a completely unknown system. And so I think I have a lot of empathy for students not knowing, because they were not prepared by peers, families, etc., about the labyrinths that you're getting in when you come to a university. And I think we especially, particularly since we merged with Thomas Jefferson University and we are Thomas Jefferson University, the bureaucratic side of the university and the labyrinths has become even more complicated. We are keenly aware of this as deans. We'll be talking about this a lot. And I know that the university is making some major changes to in a systematic approach to make things more accessible to students in general, not just first generation students, so that students don't get lost in the system. And I'm really, really happy to hear from Dr. McHeather that he's putting forward a first generation initiative for the university to coach students. We are doing something similar in the College of Architecture and the Built Environment. We're also putting forward an initiative that is based on or focused on coaching students through advising, focused on first generation and students who, in particular in the first years, to give them guidance through not only in their professional way of choosing courses, but also how do you plan a career, how do you plan your academic career versus your professional career, to give them all of this help that they actually need. I do think that, and Barbara Kimmelman, I might be wrong, but I know from other universities that they do a 1-credit course for all incoming students that orients students within the university, that shows them all of the different services, departments, etc., that where students are, where these simple questions that can be asked and that can be answered. So I wonder whether that is something that Thomas Jefferson University could do. And I'm with Evan or Dr. Lane here on with regards to retention and graduation. These are important markers for rankings, and it's not just the revenue, the tuition and the fees and all of that. I think that is really the secondary piece here. It is really also, it benefits all of us if we keep the students who were coming to Thomas Jefferson University, have chosen Thomas Jefferson University, and make sure that they successfully can graduate. And we actually put the resources behind this to do this. Higher retention rates, higher graduation rates, and higher rates to go to graduate school and job placement rates always are positive for a university and makes us a really competitive institution in the marketplace. So I'm fully with you for many, many reasons. I think this is really important, and you have my full backing for what you actually said.
Thank you so much, Dean Klinkhammer. That means so much. you made a lot of really good points as well. So if we could next go to Bendriel for a moment.
Hi, I raised my hand to bring back up something that I talked about when I was speaking. I don't know how possible it would be. I really think an FYS program or class, a required course dedicated to first gen college students would be very helpful. And the reason I say this is because while I'm not invalidating the importance of the FYS classes that are in place now at Jefferson, I think they did not cover some of the things that I actually had to deal with during my first year that distracted me from having to deal with the things that they were teaching me. They were teaching me about things to do locally. Granted, I am from Philly anyway, so that would not have made much of a difference, but they were teaching things that you stereotypically think of when you associate first year of college. Meanwhile, I was focused on the fact that I had wrongly assumed the government would pay for anything that I couldn't afford for college, which was basically everything. Like I actually walked onto campus because I assumed when you apply to college, merit-based scholarships would be given to you based on your grades. And then anything you couldn't afford after that, the government would just pay. And I was like, oh my God, that's so lovely. The government's so nice. Turns out that wasn't the case. I finally learned how to apply for student loans, and it turns out you had to accept them or else the government would take the money back. That I didn't know either. These are some of the things that I was worried about during my first year, not whether or not I could get alcohol onto like my college campus dorm and how that would violate school policy. Like, not saying those are not things that are important to know, but there are other things that are specific to first-gen students that I think would be really, really beneficial to have as a separate first-year student class with the emphasis on first, not just your first year in college, but your first time interacting with college. Because prior to actually starting college myself, I didn't have anyone above me telling me about it. My parents didn't attend, my other family members didn't attend, not even my older sister. So I literally was taking on everything by myself. And it just would have been very nice if I would have had this opportunity at my previous university, at Jefferson, just at some point early on, where someone explained financial, social, mental things that come with college as a first-gen student. So again, I'm not sure about the plausibility or the feasibility of that, but I truly think it'd be a really worthwhile investment in terms of retention and just making sure your students don't feel like they're just a number.
Thank you so much. That's a really, really good idea. So I don't want to butcher anyone's name, so please feel free to correct me. But is it Miss Wyatt, if you would like to say a few words?
Yes, Neoka. So Neoka Wyatt, I am the chair of the Diversity Action Committee in the College of Design, Engineering, and Commerce. So first, let me just thank everyone for sharing such profound experiences, and in some cases, very traumatizing. Some of your stories I experienced as a student as well. But as chair of the committee, we actually work with some of our first-gen college students to kind of help them navigate some of the challenges that they were facing. And I must admit, it wasn't an easy task. And we also, and we did this, I will say we did this by collaborating with a lot of the clubs on campus. And what we decided to do, which was something very small, but was a lasting impact, was to create t-shirts for our students that says, I am first, so that when you go to class, faculty would help to, recognize how you identify. So while it was a great initiative, I find that some students still are not aware, like you mentioned, of the support, and we are not reaching enough students. But if I can help in any way, I will put my email in the chat so you all have, know where to find me. And again, if I can help in any way to support you, just please don't hesitate to reach out. Because I know as first-gen students, we always sometimes have a problem with asking for help as well. But I am here if you need me.
Thank you so much. That's a really wonderful and I think empowering idea as far as the t-shirts.
If anyone would like a t-shirt, I will be happy to share.
Thank you.
And I can verify that she gave me a shirt.
Wow,
Very proud of that fact.
so cute. And I do want to just acknowledge anyone who needs to get off at 2 can feel completely free, but we do have about 8 minutes at least before then. So I want to get to, again, please correct me because I know I'm going to butcher these pronunciations, but Ahmed Kais Manhazim?
Yeah. Thank you, Kaitlyn. My name is Ahmed Kais Manhazim. I go by Kais. I really would like to thank everyone for organizing this, especially Kaitlyn and Professor Lane, Leslie, and Aliyah, who I had the honor of having in my class, and also Benny, for also sharing your very powerful testimonials. I'm an assistant professor of global studies at College of Humanities and Sciences. I never thought that I would be in this position as first generation student. And I was also an international student coming to the US, and then I became undocumented. And I totally share the same struggles because for the first year in college here in the US, I didn't even know how to check my grades. I didn't know even if I passed or not because I didn't know where to check it. And I was so embarrassed to ask people, or I couldn't even go to the gym thinking that the gym was actually, I had to pay for it. So for 2 years, literally, I tried to avoid and walk by it, wanting to go, but I didn't know it was free. So all of those are very small but very meaningful things that we need to also provide information and resources for first generation students on campus. And I'm also here to support, but also volunteer myself as any sort of mentorship if first generation student needs on campus. I think that would be a really important step for a lot of the faculty to take up that sort of responsibility voluntarily, because that's the only reason that I was able to apply for grad school, despite the fact that I only applied for one grad school since I couldn't afford to apply for more than one program, although a lot of people who go to grad school, they apply for several. And I only had $45 to apply for one school, and then I was lucky to get in. But also, if there is any possibility of creating some sort of funds for students who apply for law school and grad school, that the applications are $45, $50, or $60, which doesn't seem a lot, but then if you apply for several, or if you're a student, that's a lot of money. And if there is any sort of university support to possibly open a fund like that, that will really help first generation. And also first generation is not only first generation, it's also a question of racialized students of coming from working class backgrounds, queer and trans students, and immigrants, because they all intersect in so many ways. So I'm here to help and support. And if anybody wants my mentorship, I will write also my email. Please reach out.
Thank you so much for putting yourself out there as a resource. That means so much to all of us. I think I speak for everyone when I say that. I do just want to call on Gabriella Carrillo just to get another student perspective, and then we'll go back to faculty. Again, anyone who needs to leave at 2, no worries at all.
Hi guys, my name is Gabby. I am one of Kaitlyn's really close friends and an advocate for first gen students. I cannot say that I was a first gen student, but I experienced Kaitlyn's experience firsthand as like something that I'll never be able to understand. And I don't know. Kaitlyn, I'm so proud of you because I don't know how you're here right now, 4 years later, and you're still in college. And like Kaitlyn has been someone that we moved into school, and the next day she had to get a job. She was like, listen, if I want to stay in school, I have to get a job. And I was like, well, Kaitlyn, this is the first year, let's have a good time. And she's like, this is not how it works. And so on behalf of my mother, who couldn't be here today, has always been someone that I look up to. And I can be honest, I don't know how to do a FAFSA. I'm 22 years old. I know how to do a FAFSA. I don't know how to do anything with financially. Like once I got to school, I just thought like, this is it. Like we're here. And my mom was someone that definitely helped Kaitlyn through this, because I would, as one of my best friends, I'd call my mom and be like, listen, Kaitlyn just got an email that she can't be like, remember, I'm not sure if anyone remembers our sophomore year that we got an email that was like, if you don't pay this $24,000 by tomorrow, you can't be in school. So I think that's something that is very upsetting, because like how are students who have no idea how to do this supposed to come up with something like that? I think Bendriel's idea about the FYS class, because for someone that has taken the FYS class, it's strictly about where to go to eat in Philly, what bars to go to, things to do, and not like how to stay in school. Like once you're at school, what to do, but not how to stay in school. So I think that this is a very important conversation that obviously needs to be brought up to something higher, because it's not fair to students like Kaitlyn that have no idea. And there's no guide or there's no book on like how to stay in college. So I think there needs to be something that we needed, like there needs to be a heavier conversation, because this is something that is very important. And I believe that Professor Lane brought up, like, this is money for colleges. Like, this is something that is important to us. And many students, like, if I hadn't had the guidance of my mother, I wouldn't be here either. And I think for someone like Kaitlyn, who doesn't have someone to tell her what to do or tell her how to do it, then it's almost pointless at this point. So Kaitlyn, I'm so proud of you for what you've done, and I appreciate everyone that's come out to support her and help this. I have to get going, but I really appreciate everyone coming on here and helping out. So
Thank you so much, Gabby.
thanks, Kaitlyn.
So again, anyone who needs to leave, no worries at all. I do want to give Ms. Donnelly an opportunity to speak, and then Mr. Nichols, if you guys would like to share.
Hi, my name is Megan Donnelly. I'm a student success and outreach librarian at the Paul J. Gutman Library. I just started here recently on January 3rd, but I have extensive experience working exclusively with first-gen students in my previous positions, and I identify as first-gen myself as well, so I'm more than happy to serve as a mentor to students. And thank you everyone for sharing your first-gen stories today. There's a lot of strength in vulnerability, and it's wonderful to connect with people over these things today. And some ways that you can work with me as a librarian and as a first-gen advocate are for affordable course materials. That's something I've done a lot in the past. So if you're interested in expanding course reserves are textbooks and other course materials that are put on reserve behind the circulation desk at the library. So those materials are free to students, and you can use them in the library for 4 hours at a time. So if you're interested in expanding that, I'm open to that. And also I've done a lot of work with open educational resources, which are course materials and textbooks that have a different kind of copyright license, whereas they're free to students. So those are just a few ways we can work together, but feel free to email me at any point if you need a mentor or someone to talk to, or if you need help with research, which is also a big barrier when you're a first-gen student. Maybe your parents never performed research before, so I'm happy to help with that, and I'll drop my email in the chat.
Thank you so much. I think textbooks in the first place are just a major expense that a lot of first gens, including myself, had no idea were a thing. I thought that tuition was thousands of dollars later, it had included that, but boy, was I wrong. And so, yeah, if we can have Mr. Nichols speak next, we would love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Kaitlyn. I do have to step off in just a moment, and so I'll be really brief. I just wanted to thank everyone for sharing their stories. And though I am no longer on the East Falls campus specifically, and I'm now, my position is now housed in the enterprise, I want to say that on behalf of the DEI office, but also on behalf of myself, I am also a first-generation college student, and so I know the benefit of having that mentorship, that support system when you are, applying for FAFSA, when you're just navigating the daily life. I had 5 jobs in school, opened up the gym, closed the gym, also an RA, worked off campus. So I get the hustle and everything. And so I do definitely appreciate you all, and also trying to stay on the dean's list. Didn't do that every semester, but I thank you all for sharing your stories, and also just wanted to say really quickly, one initiative of the Office for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Community Engagement within the Jefferson Enterprise is to establish a Center for Inclusive Excellence, and that was started by Lizette Martinez, who is the Executive VP for Diversity. for the enterprise. And so that is still an initiative that we are seeking to establish on both the East Falls and Center City campuses. Sometime over the next month or two, I'll be doing a call out for student focus groups and feedback to gain more information on resources that you all need, resources that you all want to see within those student centers. As Dr. McHeather stated earlier, one of the processes of the enterprise is just to, submit proposals for funding and positions and everything. So in the midst of that right now, but in the meantime, we are doing those focus groups. And so when you see that email, please, if you can't attend, email and contact me directly. I'll also put my contact information in the chat as well. But that is one initiative that the enterprise is undertaking. And there is a aspect of that proposal to have a mentorship program for underrepresented students. And to now know that, you all want to see something specifically for first generation students is hugely beneficial. So I just wanted to put that out there that once you see that call for student feedback and the focus group, please attend and or just reach out to me, because this is something that we're trying to get off the ground within the next year.
Thank you so much. So lastly, I'm just going to take Lola, who is a Jefferson student on campus currently, and then just back to Chancellor McHeather, and then we'll wrap it up.
Hi, yes, my name is Lola. I just wanted to say really shortly, like Kaitlyn, I'm so thankful that you brought it up to me. I'm on the dance team with Kaitlyn here at Jefferson, and she asked one of these practices a couple of weeks ago, like, hey, is anyone a first generation? And more than half the girls in the class raised their hands. And I didn't know that there's people like me around that probably experiencing the same struggles that I have. So I would like to say thank you for that, and thank you for everyone who's spoken. On the aspect of imposter syndrome that Leslie talked about at the beginning, like I definitely still deal with that now as an athlete. I know there's a lot of student athletes who have definitely struggled with imposter syndrome and also with mental health, trying to navigate all these things, trying to excel in academics and in their sport. And even now on my soccer team, I've seen people currently struggling, and I struggled last semester too. So I like having more resources, or having just like the communication there that there's other people like me, or someone that's willingly able to support and help would definitely be beneficial. Or even the fact that I've had 3 roommates in the past year that have left. Someone withdrew from the university in August, another one 2 weeks in withdrew, and another one on Saturday withdrew from the university due to mental health. And all 3 were first generation students. So I don't want to see that for any more people. Being a junior now, I would love to be a part of anything, any initiative that is going on, but I also would like to say thank you for making this heard. And I believe that this is something that should continue to go higher up in the university. So thank you, Kaitlyn. Thank you, everyone who came onto the call.
Thank you so much, Lola. That's really heartbreaking to hear, but unfortunately it doesn't surprise me very much. So Chancellor McHeather, we can end on you.
Wow. This has been a great conversation. And you hate to hear about the people that we've lost because of various reasons, but in particular because they're first gen and didn't know how to get help. I think the one thing that someone said, maybe it was Juliana, that sort of reminded me of a conversation I had at my previous institution with a bunch of students. And sometimes you just forget. You get so far in your career, you forget. But these students said to me, and I'll never forget this, Dr. McHeather, our job was to get to college. That was our job. We had no idea what it would take to stay. And I think for many first-gen students, that's the goal. You're the first, everybody's proud of you. And the mental pressure is now not wanting to let people down. I got here, and now who do I reach to for help? Because nobody at home can really help me. So this idea of my job was to get here, nobody told me how to be successful. And I think that's what this conversation in many ways is really about. And just know that this is a conversation that's going on throughout the country. You know, I know that there's, I think it's either October, maybe November, there's a National First and Generation Day. We'll have that day next, if it's October or November, we'll have that day here for sure. You know, in addition to other things we're hoping that we can do as well. So I'll just say again to Kaitlyn and to everyone, thank you for having this event. Thank you for inviting me. I much appreciate it. And I do look forward to continued conversations. And if anybody would like to reach out to me to have a more of a conversation, I'm here for that. If someone's looking for a mentor, I offer myself as well. So again, thank you so much.
And I just want to say one last huge thank you to everyone for joining. I really can't emphasize enough how much this means to me, especially as someone who almost had to leave freshman year and then also sophomore year again, just because finances weren't there. And just hearing everyone's struggles as a first gen is so bittersweet because we're so resilient, and hearing that faculty knows that this is a problem and they're aware and they're looking to support us and they want to implement new systems is really encouraging. And I think a lot of first gens feel similarly. So thank you guys again so much for joining. I really can't thank you enough. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their afternoon.